Hey, I'm back another one. And with this video, I want to say you might have a real shooter on your hands. You have a real shooter in front of your face talking to you, and a lot of people are like, "What are you talking about?" Well, first of all, I don't want to make light of violence, but I want to say, how would you know that you actually have a real shooter on your hands? So, the first thing would be that a real shooter would have would actually know what a weapon is, or maybe has practiced a weapon. Like, so maybe not so have you practiced something would make you something if you've practiced it. But then on top of that, the main thing that I think would separate a real shooter from anyone like playing with guns, like the difference between a child playing with guns, an adult playing with guns, whether or not they maim themselves or someone else, what would make them a shooter would be that they would have an appreciation for for gravity and for the spin of the earth. Because like if a normal person, I wasn't really like into well, actually, when I was young, I actually was actually into like a lot of like weapons. Like as I mean, so when I was young, I come from a background of weapons. I had like a lot of Nerf guns, like all different grades and scales of Nerf guns. Like they would have like soft foam darts, and I was very able to land some of those soft darts onto the foreheads, and even like some of the most sensitive parts of the human body. I was able to do that with very foam and rubber implements with Nerf guns. And then I also was skilled in curating and preparing water balloons. And sometimes I noticed that with the more formidable the stash of water balloons, and the more cleverly concealed and tucked away, and also if I was collaborating with cohorts in order to get over an advantage on an enemy position of regular peers of mine who didn't have permission to get wet that day, according to their parents, I would notice that oftentimes the stash of water balloons would be employed against myself, likely when I had my back turned. So some of our most effective implements as far as like toy guns and also water guns and no less than water balloons tend to come back against us more so than the position that we had intended to assail with the water balloon. And then also I had various tiers of large small to large scale water guns. Some of them would be very simple and almost useless, but then some of them were big and so much so that they were difficult to bear. And one of those implements, the first time that I had been into contention with different people in the neighborhood, and I availed myself of my facility with my relationship to my mother, and I asked her to take me to a ride across town to the local dispensary of water guns that was at that time, I think it was called Toys R Us. They're not as popular anymore. I don't know if they were I don't know how some of their weaponry in terms of toy guns and water guns was being employed in times past, and if that had to do anything with them going under and just the accounting from that, because some accounting is above and below board. But we can appreciate that a lot of these water guns were being implemented to get people completely soaking wet who did not have permission to get wet that day, or maybe even be outside at that day, depending on the time of day or night. They might have been breaching curfew, especially if it were a school night. But then I procured that large weapon and implement. That one was more so straight. It had a little tank in the back, and it was nothing but like alarm. It would actually really ratchet up to a high degree of pressure to employ the water, almost like a water hose spigot in order to blast. And that's precisely what I needed to avail the position of the opposition, who are a little bit older than me, at least 5 and 6 years older than me. So as soon as I got that implement, I filled it with water while I could anticipate that they'd still be outside fraternizing and not expecting me and my cohorts who were part of my plan with me. And then as soon as I came within proximity close enough to implement and engage them with the water gun, some of the older of which had a little bit more muscular strength, because they had already been through what's considered as puberty, and they quickly confiscated the water gun from me and employed it against me. So more so the advantage turned into a disadvantage, and I had got up over on myself by employing that. And then when I got a little bit later, I actually migrated to a different part of the country because I had survived that episode. And then I had that very water gun, and I intended to use that water gun on another episode of peers of mine that I wanted to get over on. But one of my comrades, he wanted to borrow the water gun because he needed something to drink, but it did yet have quite a high degree of pressure that could be ratcheted up and contained within that water gun. And then when he attempted to drink from the spigot of the water gun by engaging the triggering apparatus, it actually blew a larger quantity of water into his mouth than he had anticipated, and it was a little bit comical, but it was actually a little bit dangerous how much water had blasted on him. And then while I was doing that, some of the other children in the neighborhood, they were a little bit more cunning. So we had still used that water gun to get up on another position, and there was actually the more lethal of my friends as a young person was at least he was a couple of degrees younger than me and my main comrade who almost blew his face off with the water gun, and the other one was but he was more clever and more canny, and but he was shorter in stature and also age, and we had recruited him because one time he was he was also excellent because he was bilingual, and I've said that sometimes people who are bilingual may have a greater facility with speaking and communicating, and therefore even thinking, and confidence that would come with that. Also very important for accomplishing anything is confidence in our appearance, and how our confidence informs our appearance, and our appearance informs our confidence, and also our capacity and facility around things, not least of which language factors into that. But he had been part of an immersion program, a second language immersion program for education, and he got into some contention with other students, and he was actually, not the least of which, intimidated by the other students, but had began to spend what time he had on his hands in class to create flyers and advertisement for his for what would be the equivalent of a showdown with another student, but that he wanted to publicize as much as possible because he wanted to hand what is appreciated as, I've called in another video that I may be something of a tactful and respectful donkey, but he really wanted to actually hand this person's ass to him publicly. So we had recruited him for that purpose, and then somehow in there he may have actually broke his, he had something had happened with his foot, and he had crutches, but he wasn't one to be limited by crutches, because anything that helps, even such as like medication, can amount to a crutch, and it can stifle development and dispensation with support no less than crutches. But he was still effective even with the crutches, and something of a hobble. I wasn't sure if he had maybe had like perhaps broken the foot off while also putting that foot against the flesh of the hindquarters, or the lower bifurcated rear abdomen of another comrade or ex-comrade of his, maybe not the least of which one of his peers in that educational setting that he had advertised and promulgated the actual ass handing to publicly. And then he did yet have a little bit of a he had to yet gate with that. And so as we were attempting later with his support, after having recruited him to get over on the position of some other peers of ours who were yet a little bit older, he was able to use the concealment and the assumption of his being a non-lethal participant, or a non aquatic participant in a water engagement, to scurry the rear perimeter of their position and turn off the water hose that they were employing to defend themselves. So we quickly got up over on them and employed that very heavy water gun successfully. But then as we were getting away from that, their actual peers had been waiting for us, and instead of using water balloons, they actually had like a big bag of water, just a big bag of water, because they had somehow been prepared or competent for these type of difficulties. And so as I was standing there, they isolated me, and then one of them ramped up the water bag like in a circle like many times, and I was so suspended by the shock and the amazement of the spectacle, and that they would actually use a bag of water, that I stayed still long enough for them to propel the bag of water onto my physical person, my body, and I became completely soaking and obliteratingly wet. And I appreciated that had this been a real military engagement with a different implement, I would have experienced something very heinous and atrocious, and I wouldn't actually be here to remember it, but it would have been quite a spectacle for anyone to observe, even like someone that may have loved or cared for me, that would come across my person that had at least had a lot of water on it. So from that point I started to respect combat and conflict, and staying far in the hell away from anything to do with weapons. But if you were to do it with someone with a shooter, they would have an appreciation for the pull of the earth, and how magnetism, how the orbit of the earth affects something that's a projectile. And I had enough facility around implements to understand that if you aim something directly at something, you likely won't reach what you're approaching. So you have to tilt it up a little bit, because the pull of the earth, the gravity, even within a short distance, if you were to fire something completely straight, as quick, the same amount of time that it would take the spent casing to fall to the ground, the forward projected projectile will reach the ground at the same point. So from that understanding, you can appreciate that there would have to be an arc. But I did this with basketball, so I actually practiced basketball a lot alone as a small child, but then even as a latter adolescence and early adult. And I did so to such an extent alone that one time when I was putting shots up, I could appreciate that they were all falling exactly a little bit to the side like that, and it made me appreciate that we really are on a floating rock, and as that rock is floating, it's making the basketball fall down at the same angle, and so that would make me a shooter just with that appreciation. But you can take that broader in that if you appreciate the orbit of the earth, you can get outside of the concept of linear time, is where I'm saying.